Good morning, students. This is Professor Wedlock here to talk to you about our very last assignment for the Gen 400 class. It's our Unit 3 paper. It's a personal synthesis of learning and research. The purpose of this final project is for you to pull together to synthesize what you have been learning about in the Mercy core values with this idea of creating a vision for your future that we've been discussing since the very first sessions. So what foundation grounds your education? What bridges have you traversed? What fields and subjects have you walked through? What philosophies and inquiries have you sat with? Who has journeyed with you, whether they be in person, in word, in image, and thought? Where have you been? Where are you now? Where is there to go from here? What are the topics, issues, concerns, controversies that most engage you? And how will you use both what you have learned, the content, and the skills that you have learned, information literacy, to question, propose, and solve these problems? Who will be your ally? Who is left out of this conversation? Who is included, and why? How? What is your vision for the future, and what will you contribute? The requirements for this project include a paper that is 6 to 8 pages long. It must include citation from 7 sources. 3 of the sources should be texts that we encountered in our course. 1 from Unit 1, 1 from Unit 2 that you assigned the class, and 1 from Unit 2 that was assigned to you by another student presenter. In addition to these 3 sources, you'll find 4 research materials. They can be scholarly journals or academic books, conference proceedings, statistics from the Pew Research Center or American Community, anything that would fall into that scholarly category. You don't have to limit yourself to looking at the scholarly sources to get a background or a feel for your field. If you want to read some articles on NPR, if you want to listen to the radio, if you want to look at TED Talks, to get some ideas, you can use those types of sources to create background, context. These can work in the introduction sections and the conclusion sections. I would just recommend that you don't use those sources as your heavy lifting for evidence in the research part of the paper. The final project also must integrate some aspect of the learning that you gained from the service learning experience, however small it is. If it's something about working with other people in collaboration, or if it's something you learned from your actual project, or perhaps some research you had to do for your group, anything of that nature you can apply towards this paper. The final paper should be typed and submitted to Blackboard. It is due on Sunday, August 18th at 11:59 p.m. The paper includes 3 parts. Use some headings and subheadings to help make the paper more accessible. There are 3 components to the final project. The introduction is a reflection piece based on the Mercy core values. The middle section is research. It is the application of the core values to a very specific critical concern. And the finale piece is the personal synthesis, where you give a personal touch to your reflection and research. Think of this section as a manifesto, what you plan to do. Additionally, you'll need a works cited or bibliography page. You can work in MLA or an APA. It is up to you to make that decision. For the first part of the paper, it is a reflection piece. Use your discussion board posts, your critical concerns assignment, your informal essay, and your formal Unit 1 essay to craft this section. They can all be used as rough draft material to shape and discern and write this section. You've written so much, so the challenge now will be to make decisions about what you leave out and what you include. You'll really want to shape and focus this beginning reflection based on the direction you see your research going. So this becomes an essential foundation of values, and the direction you see your manifesto, your section 3, your vision going. Because we've already looked at these ideas and you've received feedback on those papers, this section will include a little bit of meta-reflection or meta-analysis. So you're going to start to make more connections between and among the sources and between and among your course content and the classes that you've taken in the past and how you might see this proceeding in the future. So the more specific you can be in this section, the better. I recommend after writing this section of the draft to stop, pause, reread what you have written, and listen in for the big themes and the smaller subtexts that are emerging in your paper. While we're all going to be reflecting on the very same values, which themes are we being driven by? Are we looking at this as a process of thinking about expectations, identity, perception? What are some of the underlying subtext that might be there? Are we looking to debunk racism, to deconstruct sexism? Are we noticing classism around us? What are some of the underlying questions, inquiries, challenges, stereotypes that we're recognizing in the readings or in our culture, and how are they surfacing when we go to write about something as abstract as values and as applied as experience? This second section relies on you trusting your gut to come up with a critical concern that drives you forward. What issues exist out there? What problems or controversies affect you in your personal or your professional life? And how can you address them with this education that you have cultivated for yourself? What issues stick with you? What are things that are hard to turn away from, that you just cannot divert your attention away from, that you must bring into focus? We've heard a lot about the danger of indifference and the danger of inaction, and we've also thought about the power of listening and the power of sitting with. So how do we balance these two things and find a way to approach these issues that both honors our capacity to take them in wholly and then also works with making some kind of action, some kind of catalyst from this information? Do we sit idly by and watch as these issues continue to happen, or do we do something about it? And will we do it with words? Will we do it with action? Will we do it with both? This research section is where you take the core values and you apply them to a specific critical concern. So this is what you were doing in your Unit 2 presentations. So this section, you should have a grasp on it from that Unit 2 presentation. It's going to be about 4 to 6 pages. What you'll be doing here is adding in some more research to augment and supplement what you uncovered in your initial search for the Unit 2. So here are some questions to keep in mind as you make a decision about which critical concern you might want to work with and how you might want to approach that concern. Firstly, you want to name the current critical concern or problem that you feel is worth your continued involvement or consideration. Naming it, identifying it, being very specific about it will help to focus and frame this section of the paper. It will help you avoid generalization and stay rooted and grounded in a strong thesis. Why is this critical concern or problem important to you? The closer the connection you have to the issue, the more likely you are to be able to sustain this section, right? Will you be able to approach this section and this question without bias? If you do have bias, can you recognize that as you proceed? Some things to keep in mind as you work with something that you might be passionate about, both personally or professionally. Do you feel alone in your perspective? Or do others see this critical concern as important? And do they see it important in the same way that you do? What newness might you bring to this lens? If this problem continues, if nobody does anything, what are some of the possible consequences? Another element that you want to think about in this research section is to explore the complexities and complications of the problem. So once you've named it, then you've got to unpack it. Define the concern or problem clearly and succinctly. What are some general assumptions about this problem? What were your presumptions prior to doing research? So your expectations or your hypotheses. What information can you gather about the extent of this problem? This is where your data and your analysis and observations and experience will come into play. How do you interpret this information, and what is not being said that should be said or considered? This is really a literature review, essentially, figuring out what everyone is saying, what they're leaving out, and how that affects the problem and the outcome of the problem or potential outcome of a solution. The last part of this is to consider the solutions to the critical concern of the problem. What moral principles do you think address this issue? How could an application of the Mercy Corps values address this issue? What creative idea and response would most effectively address this issue? Is there a group working on the issue that you could work along with, and in what way? What support might they need? Or what would be the upside and downside consequences of your response? In the final section of this paper, we open it up, thinking about vision, about the future, about where we see ourselves and our world, the world we share together, the one that we live in. We return to Mary Oliver and Maggie Smith, where Mary says, "Tell me what it is you plan to do with your one wild and precious life." And in the same line of Bird on Wing, Maggie Smith says, "This place could be beautiful, right? You could make this place beautiful." I ask you, what will you do with your life? And what will you do to make this place beautiful? An obligation to self and an obligation to community and other. So in this last section, the synthesis is what is emphasized, where we started in meta-reflection and metacognition, tying and pulling ideas together to create a foundation or framework. And then in the research section, we were diving in, analyzing, ripping things apart, putting them back together, reconforming. In this section, you're giving it a package, you're giving it a container, you're giving it a megaphone, a future, a place to go. This part can be around 1 to 2 pages. If you prefer to enter a different medium to write this place, you don't want to write a written statement, you can articulate your vision via poetry, artwork, and or through another creative media presentation. That would be a wonderful way to conclude this synthesis. If you have been writing so many papers and you're ready to take a paper break right here, this is the time to do it. And if one of those other mediums calls to you, I say go for it. And we'll find a way to make sure it uploads to Blackboard for you. So in this section, you're going to articulate a personal vision based on your integration of the Mercy Corps values of respect, integrity, justice, compassion, and service. This is your manifesto. This is your I have a dream moment. This is your pledge to community, profession, family, and self. How has your experience of GCU's Mercy Corps values, either past or present, contributed to the person you are today? What has been your most significant learning experience in light of these values, whether in the classroom or out of the classroom? After graduation, how do you plan to be a person of mercy in both your professional and personal world? What do you see as your commitment towards the ongoing internalization of these values and their expression in your life? Do you plan any personal commitment, advocacy, or continued service based on the importance of these values to your continued personal and or spiritual development? So that concludes the basic premise of the project. It's a long project, it's a little bit complicated. If you have any questions that arise as you start to work on this, please feel free to reach out. At the end of this week and the start of next week, I'm going to be hosting a series of office hours using Blackboard Collaborate. That way we can meet face-to-face, even if it's only through the computer, so that we can ask each other questions about the project or pitch ideas or ask for sources or some other type of help. You'll be able to see each other and you'll be able to see me at the same time. And I'm going to try to have a variety of times because I know that people are working different schedules. Some people are overseas. Some people are here with limited access. So we'll try to put a couple time slots up. And then whichever one fits your schedule, sign up for that so that we can have a conversation about anything specific you might want to question about this project. I also have included in this sessions folder, these learning modules, some brainstorming techniques, a little bit of information literacy stuff if you forget how to use the library databases, if you forget how to formulate key search terms, anything like that, we've got that there for you, and then also some drafting type stuff. Next week, I'll throw up an editing checklist to help make sure that everything is looking good and on its way to being published and shared. Thank you so much for your attention as I've explained this project, and please feel free to reach out if you have any questions.